Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about new year and new semester resolutions. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today, as many of you are starting out with a new year and a new semester, we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about resolutions you might have to get things started off right. So first up, I think this is a really big one for a lot of students, and particularly maybe if you just started law school and you finished your first semester and you're coming back to your second semester. A lot of people want to be more organized with their life and their time.
Oh yeah, isn't this like every week I talk about this? Every day, every time you and I talk on the phone or whatever, we talk about this.
Yeah, I think this is a recurring issue for pretty much everyone in the modern world. We all have a lot to do. We're trying to get it done. We're trying to maintain some sort of balance. And the reality is people are actually just not really able to multitask effectively. And I think this can be a hard lesson for a lot of people because you think like, oh, I can do 3 things at once. I'm getting 3 things done. But the reality is you're not really getting anything done. So I think particularly in this kind of hyper-saturated media environment, it's really critical to take a step back and really try to get things organized because that's actually going to make it easier for you and a lot less stressful in the end. So
hey, I found one example where you can multitask.
What's that?
Using the Instapot. The Instapot will allow you to multitask. You can cook and ignore it while doing other work. We'll talk about the Instapot later because I now have a newfound love for the Instapot, which you do too. But I'm just saying that I found an example where you can multitask.
Yeah, well, I think that's about it. Beans cooking, like not in the Instapot too, like on the stove. I just had to check on. I mean, there, of course, there are a few things you can multitask. I know,
but then I forget to check it. That's the problem. That's why I burn things.
Yeah,
so that's why the Instapot is changing my life.
Yeah, anyway. And certain aspects of this process, you don't want to multitask. You don't want to be cutting onions and also trying to read an outline. Like that's not probably going to go well. Trust me. You don't want to have finger surgery. It's not fun. Saying as someone who cut a tendon in my finger and had to have it put back together because I wasn't really paying attention. Yeah. So I think, it can seem overwhelming, I think, for sometimes to get started on like organizing. I mean, it's kind of ironic. Like I can't organize my life because I'm too disorganized. But there's a lot of tools that you can use. I mean, for example, I swear by Trello. Yes. I run everything, like our business is on Trello, personal stuff is on Trello, planning vacations is on Trello, pretty much everything I use Trello for. But whatever tools work for you, I think it's worth exploring and really spending some time, and whether it's, making sure that your Google Calendar is up to date and you have a process for that, whatever you're going to use, figure out the best method for using it and then do it consistently. And I think you'll find that your life actually becomes a lot less hectic.
It's so true. And one of the things that I constantly underestimate is the amount of energy it takes to hold information in your brain. And so if you are one of those people who likes to keep their to-do list in their brain or their grocery list or their calendar, just that takes up a lot of valuable space. It's very exhausting.
Yeah, seriously.
It's kind of it's a very exhausting way to live. And I think if you can come up with these, methods. So, like I know that you and I have talked about, like when you find something that you're out of in your house, you have a place, I think it's on your Trello board where you put that you need to buy that.
No, even better. I don't actually have to go to my Trello board. What I do is I go, obviously I have my phone pretty much all the time.
Right.
I literally send an email to my Trello board.
Oh,
and
amazing.
On that Trello board, I have what's a list called my inbox. And so a couple of times a day, and there are various ways things can get in that inbox. Like someone else might be able to add it, or if I star a Slack message, or if I send an email, they all end up on this one list. And I cannot even tell you the number of times I have gone on this list, looked at half of the things that were there, and had literally no recollection that I was going to do them.
Yeah. And that's brilliant. Today I was in Walgreens searching for something, and I was like, what was that other thing I was supposed to buy at Walgreens? I did not make a list. I thought I could leave the list in my head. It did not go well. It's the holidays while we're recording this, and the list of things I'm holding in my head right now between work and taking care of my children and taking care of myself and the holidays is enormous. I do not remember what I need at Walgreens.
No, it's all part, and having that process. Like for me, for example, there are things I've been out of, and then I email them to the board, and then I move them onto my to buy list. And what I know is that I'll forget stuff on that list. I mean, it happens all the time. So every time I'm in like a grocery store or something like that, I make a habit of looking at that list, even if I think I don't need anything. And almost always I'm like, oh, butter, of course, I need butter,
Yeah.
So like offloading these pieces of your brain in a way that you can then access them later is really going to improve your life.
It is. And using these types of tools to collaborate with others to streamline things. I mean, you and I collaborate on Trello on a moment to moment basis, basically. But I just got my husband onto Trello. I did it. We've been using it for so long. I think I got him.
Yay!
And it's lucky because I don't think he listens to the podcast, even though sometimes he tells me he does. So I'm pretty sure he won't hear me talking about him on the podcast. But I was updating something and he heard me typing, and there's this, he's basically like, are you creating a Trello card for what you're telling me? And I was like, yes, I am. And he's like, where is that Trello card? And I was like, it's on my personal to-do list. And he's like, can I get access to that? And I was like, I can make us a board. It was like a new moment in our relationship. Like we can have our own board.
It's like a very deep level of intimacy.
It is.
Your shared Trello board.
It was. I was like, I will build us a board and we can share it and we can run our life from it and live happily ever after. But I was thinking, like, if I had lived back in the day when I lived with roommates, and basically if you live with a significant other, you have a roommate. If you have small children, you just have more roommates that don't contribute much to the household other than being adorable and love. They just take from the household. But how wonderful would it have been to have some sort of shared collaboration where we could track things that were out in the house, or who had, if one person collects all the parts of the PG&E bill or whatever it might be, you could keep that stuff in one place and remove a lot of the back and forth that is also so time consuming. And I think staying organized and coming up with these different ways to collaborate with people or to track your own life also just saves you time, like going through your email or exchanging a bunch of text messages or things like that, because that's exhausting and it takes a lot of mental energy.
Yeah, so I think if you are in, say, a study group, thinking about ways to organize your work in a streamlined manner by using something like Trello can really, again, like just make everything more efficient, make it less annoying, make you not hate these people, use doodles for scheduling or schedule the same time every week. Like really just thinking about these things as a process, process problems really. Like, well, it's so annoying that every week we have to try and find a different time to meet. It's like, well, why are you doing that?
Right.
Don't do that.
Right. Don't do that.
Think about it.
Yeah, and then create a Google Calendar invite for it, and then it's automatically populated on everybody's calendar. I think just taking some moments and planning ahead, even if that's not your nature, is going to really pay off in the end. And I think as you get further into law school, even some of your larger assignments, like large papers, 30, 35-page papers, long research assignments, you can use electronic tools to organize that as well, because spending some time thoughtfully figuring out how you're going to keep track of everything is going to save you time and energy in the end when you're more stressed. And so I think that's the nice thing about the beginning of a semester or a new year is hopefully you've gotten a little time off, your head is a little clearer than it was during finals, and you have an opportunity to think about stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think any of these skills you develop are going to pay off so much when you're in the workplace, because what people may not realize is lawyers are typically working in teams all the time, and most of them are frankly pretty terrible about managing those teams. So if you are that person, even if you're very junior, who can come in and maybe have some of these tools or these processes and say, oh, I've seen this work or I've seen that work, should we try that? And it drastically improves, the communication and efficiency of your team, people will probably like that.
It's true. I use Slack, which is something we use in our business, to communicate with my mom group. Life-changing. Because even in our mom group, the email chains were getting insane. Nobody could follow what was on the email chain.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like anything you can do to get away from email is probably going to improve your life.
Yeah. All right. So technology may clean something up in your life, but also just think a bit about process. Think about, how you could set up auto pay for your bills. Think about if you can, have your rent checks in an envelope already pre-written for the year. So you just drop them off if you have to do them in, on the same date every month if somebody doesn't take electronic checks. So, I mean, there are lots of ways that you can kind of work ahead to make things easier. All right. But the other thing that's very important is you also have to take care of yourself. And I think especially if you are a first year law student, you might have found that first semester, your self-care really went into the toilet.
Yeah, think. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. So other things, I'm not big into New Year's resolutions like everybody should diet, eat clean, and do the Whole30 or go keto or whatever. Is it keto? I don't know.
I have no idea.
But follow your food bloggers and become obsessed. But I do think this is an area where sometimes after the holidays, it can be good to come up with a new food plan of how you're going to feed yourself and maybe decide you're going to eat less pizza. If pizza has become like a staple of your diet and that doesn't make you feel particularly good. So like I said earlier, I just got introduced to the Instapot, which you've been telling me about forever. It feels like.
Well, it's pretty useful.
And it's pretty amazing. And I'm super excited about it. I made eggs in it yesterday. I made elderberry syrup in it for an immunity boost. I'm really like gaining on my Instapot like options. But one of the things that I think would have been amazing to have such a tool in law school is that I could cook full meals in like 20 minutes where you don't oftentimes have a lot of time to cook. And one of the food bloggers that I do follow, because my Instagram feed is full of food, she's a busy mom. And she was saying what she does on her meal prep weekends, or when she's trying to do meals on the weekends, is she makes a dinner in the Instapot. And then she puts a second dinner in the Instapot while she's eating the dinner she cooked first. So then she only does dishes once and has 2 large meals for leftovers for multiple days of the week. I'm like, that is brilliant.
Yeah, what I'll sometimes do is like say I need to prep part of the menu and then something else I need to cook, like a grain or rice or something, is I will put everything in put the rice or the grain in the Instapot. Typically takes like 20 to 40 minutes. And then I start prepping the rest of it. And so by the time it comes out, maybe I've got like a nice like lentil chili that I'm going to eat with the rice, but everything comes out together. And you're like, oh, that was so quick versus having like multiple pots everywhere and things like, sounds like a commercial. We're not getting paid by Instapot.
We aren't.
We should sponsor.
We should.
But yeah, again, like I think thinking about this process of, like when I was in law school, we did a CSA for a while with me and my 2 roommates. And so the advantage of that was even in New York City in the middle of the winter, we were getting fruits and vegetables without having to do anything.
Yeah. And that's great too. And I've also heard of groups of friends or law students coming together and doing like potluck parties where you can, everybody makes one large quantity of food and then you can like share food. So you each go home with 5 meals for the week. I mean, there are lots of things that you can do and even make it a little bit more social. So again, if food is a problem, as in you can only eat pizza because that's what they give away free at school, then maybe you want to come up with some different ways that you can make it easier to eat better, because it's going to also keep you healthier. And that's one of the bummers about the wintertime is it's really easy to get sick and get the flu.
Yeah, and I find it really stressful when I realize like I don't have food in the house that's sort of easy to prepare or already prepared. So for me, it's like actually kind of like existentially soothing to know that I have some leftovers in the refrigerator or something like that.
That's true. Or in your freezer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To know that like, okay, I've got a study session, but I need to eat something. If you don't have anything, it's actually like, oh my God, now I'm like hungry. Now I'm like super stressed out.
Yeah. And there's another
downward spiral.
It is a downward spiral. There's another interesting, now I feel like I'm just advertising food bloggers that I follow. There's someone that, her name is also Alison, that you and I both met her back in the day in San Francisco. She's running a new business called Ends and Stems. And one of the things that she also focuses on is limiting food waste. So meal planning to limit food waste, which also saves you money because you're not wasting food. So, in your free time, you can also look up stuff like this and try and, be better about planning. So you're maybe even buying less and saving more money.
You know what else I do in my Instapot?
Oh, what do you do?
I collect all of my vegetable scraps from like cutting onions or the top of a carrot or things like that. And then I make my own veggie broth.
Oh, yes.
It's free.
Yep. That is pretty great.
I mean, you know what? It's like I just throw them in the freezer. And then when I have enough, I take them out, put in some water, turn the thing on, and then it's done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a lot about food. But I mean, I think, other aspects you might want to think about. You got to kind of examine what happened for you in the previous semesters or previous years. Did you give up on exercise? Did you give up all of your social activities with friends, particularly non-law school friends? How did the weather impact you? If you're living in a cold area, that can get really like bleak and depressing. So maybe there's a way that you can plan a trip, to go someplace else for spring break or something, or at least, maybe if it's a nice day, you commit to taking a walk outside, even if it's cold, all of these kind of things. I think just self-care and prioritizing that is what's going to help you get through the semester, hopefully in a better state.
Yeah. And I had the example just proven to me again about sometimes that you need to get out of town to get perspective was when the air quality got really, really bad in California, and Northern California specifically, because of the fires that were happening up in Butte County. And it had been oppressive. We had the worst air quality in the world for a while. And my family just left town and we went up into the mountains. And I grew up going to the mountains because I'm from a rural place that's near beautiful mountains in the Sierra Nevadas. And it's like I got out of the car and I was like, oh, right. The mountains will make everything better. It was like I could breathe again and it was cool. I am crisp. And then I got to take some walks outside and I was working because the bar results had just come out. I mean, it was a busy time, but that just being there really cleared my head and made life so much more manageable. And so I think that, if you're having a tough time and there are kind of your happy places, whether it be a beach or getting out of the city. If you're a person that finds a city very oppressive, then maybe you need to go take a weekend in the country, go visit family or friends or do something like that. It's not necessarily about spending a lot of money. It's more about, giving yourself this space to become human again so you can be the best law student you can be when you come back.
Yeah, for me, it was actually almost kind of the opposite, is that I was in school in New York City. And when I started to feel like I cannot cope with my life, what I would do oftentimes is take off like an afternoon and go to one of the amazing museums, most of which we actually got into for free. So, it was just like I could go to the Met Museum and I didn't have to pay because I had my ID and it was free, or even I think MoMA we got into free too. But these are like world-class, amazing museums, and just spending a couple of hours there, even if I just wandered around and I looked at stuff and maybe I had a tea in the cafe. But you start to feel like a human being again. And I think that's really important.
It is. And those few hours of lost studying, doing stuff like that, that's not going to make or break your grade. I mean, that's not going to make the difference. Maybe if you do that every day. But
occasionally, a few times a month, you need to take that break.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that people oftentimes cheat themselves out of is sleep. I mean, we've talked about the importance of sleep and how sleep deprivation can make you go crazy.
Happened. Clinically depressed from not sleeping.
Yeah. I have a small child, so I am also very tired. As we were just doing another podcast and I totally blanked on what I was talking about. Couldn't even recall it. It was totally gone. Sleep deprivation is real. You cannot cognitively function.
No, it does not help your retention. It doesn't help you from learning things. So if sleep is an issue for you, and I say this really from personal experience in law school, you have to deal with that. Whether it is various sleep hygiene things, and there are lots of stuff you can read about this, or whether you have to go, the medication route. There are definitely options, and you need to explore them because it is not something that you can continue not sleeping and function. It just does not work.
And I know in states where cannabis is legal, a lot of people are getting sleep relief using cannabis, which, again, make sure it's legal. We're all going to be licensed lawyers, but if you're in a place where that's legal, that's another thing that some people are exploring. If you're really struggling with sleep, I mean, I think there are more options than there have been before. And there are weighted blankets and eye masks and noise machines, and all of these different things that you can do to make your sleep better. But if you're not sleeping, you got to figure out why and try and fix it. All right. So what else can people
definitely destroy you?
Oh, yes. So what else can people do you think, for this new year and a new semester to kind of get themselves set up correctly?
Well, I think this is a good place to really think more about your job hunt. So we've talked on previous podcasts, like, oh, you can probably, as a 1L, like, you don't really need to worry about that until January. Well, it's January. So now is really the time to think about, if you don't have a summer job, what are you going to do? How are you going to get that job? If you don't have a job for after graduation as a 3L, this would be the time to really focus on that, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where it is April and you haven't done anything as a 1L. There probably are job fairs and that kind of thing. Career Services probably sending you a bunch of stuff. But I think this is the time to get your application materials together, think about what you want, explore options that may be on the table. Just have a plan. I mean, a lot of this really is just a plan. And then along with that, jobs are important, but also your academic goals.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, this is a great opportunity before things get busy to audit what went well last semester and then what needs work. So hopefully you're getting your grades, but you need to not just either celebrate them or cry about them. You need to thoughtfully evaluate them and go visit your professors and find out what went well and what needs work, so you can make some changes. And that might mean that you have to chase down your professors or make appointments or go to office hours. But this process of evaluating what happened is only going to make yourself a better law student the next semester. And, those grades, if you can pull them up, make everything easier. They make the job hunt easier. They just make everything easier. So it's worth, getting out of your comfort zone and trying to really see what needs to change to be your best law student. So you can be competitive and be spending your time in the way that you need to be spending it this semester.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people are intimidated about the idea of going and talking to their professors. We actually have a reboot course you can, apply for, which walks you through this process. But the point is, typically your professor is going to respect the fact that you came to them, not in a way to question your grade or anything like that, but to say, look, I would really love your feedback on what I could do better. Almost no one is going to reject you based on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think most professors really respect people being open to constructive criticism. And, that's part of life. You just have to be willing to become a better person. We're all works in progress. There's not,
exactly. They weren't perfect either, probably. No. It sounds weird, but even going and talking to a professor about a grade can actually lead to a deeper relationship where they might be willing to write you a letter of recommendation or something like that.
That's true.
They might, that more personal relationship could actually pay off.
Yeah, that's very true. I also think it's a good time to check in on your finances, especially if you have student loans. Make sure you understand your loans and any loan options you might have this semester. Both so that you have enough money, but that you're not taking out money that you don't appreciate what that means and what that money is really going to cost you in the end. And if you are struggling financially, take a little bit of time to see what you can do about it. Do you need to create a new budget or brainstorm ways to spend money? Maybe eating at home with your Instapot. I feel like I can't stop now. I don't know why. I need to go cook something in it later. Or do you need to start looking for new places to live when your lease is up? Maybe live with more roommates. Do you need to, just all sorts of different things to evaluate what you can do financially. It's just about sitting down and looking at things and, making those judgment calls. And I think it's not fun again, but it's very important, because huge amounts of debt or frustration around money is just going to be a big distraction, and it's not going to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, and I think particularly if you're going to be graduating in this final semester, you want to be really clear on what is going to happen with your loans when you graduate. And if you don't understand that, you need to talk to people and figure out what your options are. We did a recent podcast with a guy who kind of does this after the fact, helping people figure out their options. But you do have different options, and some of them may cost you way more money in the end. So you want to be clear on what those options are, so that you can execute on that appropriately.
Yeah, that's so true. You also want to try and incorporate some non-law related activities and maybe even some learning into your life. So if you've got hobbies, you don't necessarily want to cut them out, or if you're interested in a new hobby, of course, it can't take over all your free time. But I think it is great to have interests that aren't law school related to exercise different parts of your brain. I know, Alison, you've taken lots of classes. You're a big person. You like to talk about all your classes that you've taken.
I do. In law school, I often did different types of like exercise classes to combine learning and exercise. So, I took squash, for example. I think I did belly dancing. I did yoga. And so that's a combination of like, usually I did it with a friend. So it was like social, plus we were getting exercise, plus it was something new. And I think particularly, once you've survived that first semester, you kind of start to realize like, okay, I can't really just focus on law school all the time. And I don't really need to focus all the time. So, thinking about how to use your downtime, whether you're going to train for something or maybe you join like some sort of club sport to get like some sociability, some exercise, stuff like that, I think it'd be really useful for people.
Yeah, I think that's true. And also hanging out with non-law school people is always very healthy. And these activities can kind of help facilitate that. I also have recently kind of been reintroduced to the audiobook because I spend a lot of time walking around San Francisco. I've gotten into some podcasts more than I used to be. When we started this podcast, I didn't listen to podcasts, but I now have come to really enjoy them. But I'm listening to audiobooks because I don't have a ton of time to read right now, but I still want to be able to keep up with stuff that's going on in the world. So I'm listening to Michelle Obama's new book, which is quite interesting. And it's just nice to use different parts of your brain. And I think in law school, you spend so much of your time reading that getting information away that's not reading is really pleasant. I guess you're listening to this podcast. You may have already learned this lesson. Maybe I'm just old and outdated, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I think too, thinking of like creative outlets. So, for me, like I've taken pottery classes on the wheel, and that's like a nice creative outlet where it's kind of meditative, or some people like, if you like to paint, there are lots and lots of options. They don't necessarily have to be super expensive. I mean, if you want to do like drawing or painting, you could even get some friends together and just kind of do that on a regular schedule. There's some event near where I live called like Sip and Draw. So basically people come and have beer and then they draw. So I think almost giving yourself permission to do this type of thing is really valuable because you don't have to be studying all the time.
Very true. And if you're really struggling, let's say that this podcast has become very anxiety inducing for you because you feel like you don't know how to get your life together or how to kind of make these changes, then you need to reach out for help. That's totally normal. But, that's what therapists can help you with. If you're really struggling academically and you're worried about talking to your professors, go to academic support at your school to try and get some insight in the best way to get feedback from your professors at that given school. Alison, you mentioned our reboot course. If people want some help kind of developing a plan for the new year, that's exactly what we do. And then, of course, our one-on-one tutors can help revamp your studying as well. But you shouldn't feel like you have to go this alone. There are lots of resources for you if you are having trouble kind of jump-starting your new year and new semester.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was very lucky that there was free therapy at my second semester because I basically came back from winter break and then proceeded to more or less not go to class for a couple of weeks and was clinically depressed. And at some point, it became, the sort of thing I really didn't have a choice but to deal with. So I presented myself at the therapy office and was like, okay, so I'm pretty much having a life meltdown and about to flunk out of law school. Can you guys help? And the reality is they were amazing. It was one of the best decisions I think I've ever made in my life was to do that. And at one point, I think almost everyone I knew in law school was in therapy because, it's a stressful experience and there are people who can help you.
Yeah.
And they're there to help you and they're happy to help you. And it's not like some admission of weakness or that you're going to be a terrible attorney or something because you went and did therapy. Like, I think it's actually funny because a lot of the skills that you develop in therapy, you will then use working as a lawyer all the time.
Okay.
So like listening skills and all that kind of stuff. You can basically put yourself in the position of the therapist when you're dealing with the managing partner at your law firm who's having a flip out.
Right.
And you're like, tell me more about that.
Totally.
So it's a useful set of skills actually, and can really turn your life around. So I think whatever help you feel like you need, anything from like a personal trainer or like, some even like a class to go to, all the way to academic stuff or mental stuff or even like a lot of physical stuff. If people are not dealing with like physical issues that are impacting their experience, there's just really no reason not to ask for help.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it only is going to benefit you.
For sure. And if you are looking towards graduation and bar prep, you at this point want to start learning about your bar prep options. This could be different commercial bar review providers, different courses that can supplement those, or standalone courses, tutoring programs like ours, programs like Adapt-A-Bar that help you study for the MBE. But you need to learn. You can even try out some of those programs to help you study for the MPRE to get a better idea of the programming. You should also probably take the MPRE, but you want to kind of start getting your act together for bar prep, moral character, if you need to get fingerprinted, all of those things you want to think about in the second semester. You already mentioned, Alison, that you need to think about your finances because your loans may run out. And if your firm is not paying for your bar prep, it can be kind of tight over the summer. You may also want to think about where you're going to study. People are now thinking of studying in different places that could be cheaper and different locations, like study at a beach, study in the mountains, study in various different places. So you can kind of start researching those options. And if you think you need accommodations for any sort of learning difference, physical issue that you may need accommodations for, any sort of anxiety, clinical depression, things you've been treated for, do not wait. We have great podcasts on this, but you need to apply for accommodations yesterday. So do not wait. Do not wait.
This is definitely not something you want to wait until the last minute on.
So please, if you're in that camp, please reach out to the bar in your state and figure out what the process is. Phew, that's a lot to do, but I think we're out of time.
Yes, we are. So hopefully some of those were helpful and not too anxiety inducing. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.